My name is Emma Burlette, and for my educational advocacy praxis project, I focused on school-based advocacy, specifically to advocate for the inclusion of restorative justice discipline practices at Bel Air High School in HISD. My primary audience for this project involves administrators at Bel Air, including Mr. Michael McDonough, who is the building's principal, Ms. Celia Frank, who is the associate principal and the discipline coordinator for the campus, Michaela Segal de la Garza, who is the social emotional learning liaison, and Deborah Campbell, who is the dean of academics and in charge of the communications and facilities. So I decided to kind of target these people because they have the decision-making power to change discipline practices that currently exist at Bel Air, as well as make the school-wide changes necessary. So this includes schedules and rolling out necessary trainings to employees. So I decided to focus on discipline at Bel Air because this is the first year following a non-disrupted school year. And according to Evans et al., when students are suspended for lengthy periods and deprived of instruction, there is a type of systemic violence committed against those students. So according to this statement, COVID-19 has committed sustained systemic violence against students by removing them from the learning environment. And because this has committed so much harm, these students are acting out in record numbers. And it's not just at Bel Air, but I work there. And so I have seen these changes firsthand. This is my first year working at this school, but in talking to my colleagues, I have heard that the climate has drastically changed at Bel Air since before the pandemic. And not only that, like when the administration decided not to give teacher duty assignments this year to kind of relieve some things off of teachers' plates. But this has created more opportunities for misbehavior because there are not enough adults visible. Not only that, Bel Air has come under fire in the press recently for a lot of its discipline incidents, including fighting and bullying. There was a racially charged incident not too long ago. So it is high time for Bel Air to consider some changes to its discipline structure. So in order to discuss the success of restorative justice implementation, I believe it's important to establish a definition of restorative justice, and there are many, but I've decided to kind of stick with the United Nations definition as it was published in 2002. It defines restorative justice programs as those that use restorative processes and seeks to achieve restorative outcomes. It also means any process in which the victim and the offender, and where appropriate, any other individuals or community members affected by a crime, participate together actively in the resolution of matters arising from the crime, generally with the help of a facilitator. Restorative justice first starts to be researched as it relates to youth in New Zealand and Australia, specifically in Australia. Both of these countries were dealing with growing juvenile justice problems in the late 80s and early 90s, specifically in its Indigenous communities. And so researchers decided to offer juveniles who were charged with a crime an alternative to court, and that included restorative justice processes. And the results of these experiments showed that restorative justice reduced reoffending significantly more successfully than did court and violence experiments. Across all experiments, there were significantly higher perceptions of procedural fairness among both victims and offenders whose cases were dealt with by RJ rather than court. And in both property and violence, victims expressed much higher levels of satisfaction with restorative justice than with court. Due to the success of the research studies with restorative justice in juvenile court systems, public schools decided to start to implement restorative justice practices in their discipline processes. So Syracuse, Denver, and Cleveland were all large metropolitan school districts that were dealing with severe racial disparity and suspension rate problems. And after the implementation of restorative justice in these schools, the data showed that all three substantially reduced exclusionary discipline meaning anything that takes the student out of the learning environment, in school suspension, out of school suspension, etc. So in Syracuse, 54% fewer Black students were suspended in 2014 and 15 than in 2011 and 12. Denver's overall suspension rate dropped by half. And in Cleveland, schools whose principals reported medium or high level of implementation of restorative justice discipline incidents decreased significantly in the categories of disobedient and disruptive behavior, fighting and violence, harassment and intimidation, and serious bodily injury. Oakland Unified School District in 2012 entered a voluntary resolution agreement with the U.S. Department of Education to end its investigation into racial discrimination in the district, and so it decided to use restorative justice processes instead of its punitive disciplinary processes. And from 2011 to 13, its overall suspension rate dropped from 13.2% to 10.2%. The suspension rate of Black students decreased by 7 percentage points, the greatest decrease relative to other groups. And from 2011 to 14, the number of referrals issued to Black males for disruption or willful defiance declined by 37%. So in public schools and in juvenile justice systems, restorative justice is working. So my ideas for implementing restorative justice at Bel Air includes a multi-tiered system of support. And this could include the addition of a class period, either daily or weekly, that allows students the opportunity to contribute to a community building circle. This is based on the model that Denver Public Schools adopted. So this would be mediated by a teacher, and they would reflect on a prompt or question or take turns voicing perspectives. So it would give them the opportunity to kind of speak up and be heard and start to kind of build this culture and climate at Bel Air of inclusion and, listening and things like that. Students who were involved in a disciplinary infraction, something that's minor, like a code of conduct violation, can participate in a responsive circle to resolve problems, and these should include all involved parties in the conflict. This can include a teacher, a community member, a parent, things like that. And very serious disciplinary infractions can involve restorative conferences in which a third-party facilitator leads the exchange with a structured set of questions, and everyone in the group responds to them. And participants can work together to achieve a solution and repair the harm caused. So this allows victims to kind of voice, the harm that was done to them, and the student who committed the disciplinary infraction to also be heard, and gives them equal footing and equal respect. So how can we start to look at the implementation? What are some of the issues that are going to be involved in this? So when can we expect results? According to Evans et al., school climate changes start to become visible after 3 to 5 years. And that doesn't seem like a short amount of time, but, I believe that in order to enact lasting change, we have to do it right. You have to invest. How do we pay for this? It will require funding, and it will require training, and it will require personnel. But they have Bel Air has access to funding from HISD for staff professional development, for implementation of restorative justice at the classroom level. TEA also has a restorative justice grant program that began in 2015, and there are many federal grant programs that are earmarked for restorative justice implementation. So there's funding available. And how do we get stakeholders on board? So it might seem like it's too soft of an approach to discipline, specifically if there are a lot of issues this past school year, but it involves stakeholders, and it makes the disciplinary process a lot more transparent. So teachers are going to get involved if there are a multi-tiered system of support. Community members like parents, and other students have the opportunity to kind of hear one another out and know, this also increases social and emotional literacy. It builds relationships with students, school personnel, and community members, and improves victim satisfaction. And not only that, but, according to data, this can really enact lasting change for students. So if restorative justice isn't implemented and it just the discipline processes remain the way they are, students are going to continue to be harmed. They need help to readjust to the school environment, specifically after COVID-19. And a lot of them really don't have a lot of emotional literacy after being home for a year and a half, or social literacy. So in order to kind of enact these changes, restorative justice can address a lot of those issues that Bel Air is seeing as to why discipline rates are so high, why the culture and climate of the school has declined, and things like that. But I know I went a little over time, but I believe all of the information was really important. All of the data was really telling of how restorative justice can really improve Bel Air's situation at the moment. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it, and hope you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful summer.